Coaching the plank is, I think, one of the harder exercises to actually coach, but a lot of people think it's one of the easiest exercises to perform. So during this video, I'm going to cover my favorite coaching progression from, I'll say, I don't even want to say the easiest plank, but the plank that provides the most feedback, all the way up to a loaded plank where you're adding weight to your body. Before we cover the progressions, I want to talk about just some basic setup that holds true throughout all of the planks. Whether you're in a tall position with your arms extended, a low position from your elbows, these positional setups don't change. They're uniform. It's what we do. So one, setting up your hands. Your hands should be about shoulder width apart. And the reasoning is you want to be in your strongest positions. A lot of times people don't pay attention to where their elbows or hands are set up in relation to their shoulders. And what you're doing is making yourself a lot longer than you really need to be. If I'm 5'8", I want to actually make myself as close to that as possible before extending my body to make it like I'm 5'8", doing a plank like I'm 6 feet tall. Is that a variation? Absolutely. But when we're talking about just general setup, stick your hand straight out as if you were trying to push someone. That's where your hands should be. We'll come to the ground. And then from this position, I'll turn to the side so you can see it. I'm going to set it up so that the back of my wrists are straight up to my armpits. I think a lot of people tend to lean back and set it up so their wrists are closer to where their eyes should be. But in this position, I'm now in the strongest mechanical position to simulate pushing into the ground. And I think that's a cue that people often forget. When you're in a plank, you're not just holding your body up, you're literally driving the ground away to create stiffness and tension. So I have my hands shoulder width apart, my wrists are in line with my armpits, I set up, I bring my feet back, pushing my ankles and knees together, and then from here I can lift up, and I'm only initiating the movement from my knees. I'm almost in this quadruped position. I lift my knees up, my hands and shoulders don't move. I think you can see from that position, I'm not like climbing my way up to the top of the plank. All I'm doing is leaving my hands set up. My knees are right under my hips. I'm pushing my ankles and knees together to help create lower body stiffness. And then I just lift my knees off the ground and I find myself in a really good plank position that allows my body to be at maximum angles, 90 degrees in the shoulders, 90 degrees through the hips as well, to really make sure I'm creating as much stiffness as possible. So now we have our hands and our knees in a positional setup. I'm going to talk about the first variation that I typically program for people, and that's the hardstyle plank. This is something I learned from Coach Steve Fury Holliner. He's a dude out of Brooklyn, New York. He's a great coach. Check out Speakeasy Strength if you haven't. And I believe, I'm not sure, I believe this is a variation that the RKC uses, or kettlebell certification company. But the reason I like it is, one, it teaches you to focus your breathing in with creating tension, which we know creating tension is super important for lifting weights and creating a strong, stable body. And two, because it's kind of programmed in a way of reps and exhales, you're not just arbitrarily holding a plank for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, whatever it is. You have a little bit more intent behind the exercise itself. So I can do this literally from my shoulders or my elbows, whichever variation you want. I'm actually gonna set up from my elbows on this one. So same setup, elbows are shoulder width apart. I want my elbow in line with my armpit. I'm gonna come to the ground. My knees and ankles are pushed together. And from this position, the first movement is to take a huge inhale, and hopefully you can see this in the video, where my shoulder blades now start to drive apart on that inhale. So a big inhale, I'm pushing my shoulder blades away, like I'm pushing into the ground, reaching my shoulders up to the ceiling. From here, I'm gonna lift my ankles and knees up, and I'm gonna push through a forceful exhale out of my mouth. And what I wanna do when I exhale is think about a balloon in my upper back, and I don't wanna let it deflate with my exhale. So the full rep is gonna be inhale, push away with the ground, bring my knees and ankles up off the ground, creating tension, and then I'm gonna exhale, and as I exhale, you should see the position in my upper back not change. I like to use the analogy of a puffer fish. Take a big inhale, that puffer fish expands. As you exhale, keep that puffer fish full in your upper back. It might feel like you're turning into Quasimodo in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but what you're doing is building expansion through your upper back. you're creating stiffness through your upper back and muscles in your back, core, pillar, glutes, whatever you want to say. But as you exhale and you're releasing that tension, you're able to actually maintain it through the entire breath work, which is really important. These are typically programmed on reps based off of your exhales. I like doing 6, 8, 10, good deep breaths. And the next step up from there would be to really focus on how long your exhale is versus how long your inhale is. But that hardstyle plank is a go-to variation that I start almost all people that I work with in their programs, because it just does a good job of teaching tension in a movement that I think everyone knows, has seen, and probably has done to some extent, but it brings a little bit more purpose and intent to it. From the hardstyle plank, we'll just go to our traditional plank. Elbows, palms, we're setting up. You kind of saw me cover that in the initial base movement setup. That's going to be typically programmed for time. And then once you kind of move out of that base level plank, I like to bring in a band. And what I like to do with the band is kind of unique, and I think it just almost reinforces that initial concept of pushing away. So if I turn around, you guys can see where this band is set up. My elbows come through the band. I have it around my shoulder blades and my upper back. And from here, if you could see, the idea of pushing away is, if this is my traditional setup, I can reach forward and start to create that round in my upper back, and that's going to allow my shoulder blades to get a little bit more involved with the movement. I push away, I set up in my plank position, wrists under my pits, my hands are shoulder width apart, I'm bringing my knees and ankles together, I'm in this nice quadruped position, I lift my knee up, and all this band is doing now is adding tension and resistance to that pushing action into the floor. So it reminds me to reach away, reminds me to get a little bit more shoulder recruitment through my plank. I'll program this again, time typically starting somewhere around 15 to 25 seconds. I don't really like to do planks much longer than that. The reasoning is, if you've done the hardstyle plank, you know tension is something we really want. I'd rather see you really focus hard on making your body as stiff as possible, driving away with that resistance, and do pulses of 15 to 20 seconds rather than something like a minute continuously. I think that towards the end of that minute, you're probably just not really getting a whole lot out of it, or you've lost your ability to create tension. The other piece behind it too, if you look at exercises we do in the weight room, like what do you do more than a minute? Like, a set of 8, a set of 10, a set of even 20 of some exercises, you're still done in about 45 seconds. So those longer durations, there really isn't a lot of carryover between a long plank and other things you'll do as far as maintaining tension. So quick recap, hardstyle plank, focusing on creating tension. Breath work is our reps. We have our base plank, hands under the pits, knees and ankles together, working at a quadruped, just lifting the knees up. We're in a nice strong position. The next progression up from there, we're adding bands to our shoulders. And then the last progression I like to do, and this is kind of the top of the line, is either adding a weight vest, a plate, chains, whatever it might be. I'll use a plate as an example today because I think most people will have access to some type of weight implement, whether it be at their home gym or their gym that they go to. So what I like to do with the plate is and I think this is the most important piece here, when I'm loading the planks for people, I really focus on putting it across their mid to lower back. Not exactly like on the top of their butt lower back, but mid to lower back rather than their shoulders. And I think this is kind of a position that really gets misunderstood because when you put it on your shoulders, what you're restricting is your ability to push those shoulder blades away, which you saw we were trying to work on with our band. The second reason is that when it's over your shoulders, that's a position of strength. I don't know if you're necessarily getting the full maximum value of adding load. And the flip side of that is when you load your hips, it's actually probably the weaker part. But when you're loading with a modest implement, so this is 5 pounds, like it's not a whole lot. This is maybe 2% of my body weight. I'm not really good at math, so don't quote me on that. But putting it on my lower back to start means I don't really need to add much weight to get a training effect, which is good. And 2, this plate now becomes a feedback cue for me while I'm doing my plank. If I'm trying to take the sag out of my lower back and I want my lower back to be nice and strong, maintaining that push away with my upper back, when my plate's there, and hopefully you can see this, if I have a sag in my lower back, I can take my hand and put my hand right in between the plate and my body. As soon as I take that sag away, Now what happens is I can't get my hand in between the plate and my spine. So the plate becomes a feedback tool for better positioning as well as adding load to increase the difficulty. Not to mention, this is maybe overlooked but appreciated, it's a lot easier to put something on your lower back by bringing your arms down than it is to reach your arms overhead and have to position the plate on your upper back. So convenience-wise, it matters. From this position, I just put one plate on my back. I now work to my plank position. Small plate, sweatshirt, it's gonna slide here. And all I'm gonna do is come up into my plank, and then I'm gonna push my lower back in towards the weight. So that plate becomes a nice tactical cue for me to push my body into. And now I'm in this strong plank position. I have the plate reinforcing where I should be pushing my spine. I'm getting a lot of feedback as I go through the plank again. Really working 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 25 seconds max in waves as needed. And that's gonna allow you to really think about the hardstyle plank, creating tension, positioning of our base level plank, the band reinforcing the push away, and then now we progress one step further. The plate is loaded on our lower back. We now can tie in everything that we've done with our plank variations to get the most out of what we're trying to do. Don't let your sets and reps cue that. So really we're looking anywhere from 2 to 5 sets of 15 to 25 seconds. And you can pulse that if you'd like. 15 seconds, do 3 5-second holds, focusing on your breath work. 25 seconds, you're looking now at 5 5-second holds or 5 exhales, whatever it might be. You can kind of play around with it, but what's nice about most bodyweight exercises, and the planks are one of them, it'll be self-limiting. When you feel like you can't maintain tension or create that tension, you're probably good to stop that set, rest, reload, and then hit it again.